Friends, brothers, sisters, firstly great to see so many of you here. I think they've underestimated our determination if people are going to slog on a Friday, so on a Saturday morning. Some of you looking a bit hungover, if I'm going to be honest. So clearly we have more fight than they expect. I just want to start by expressing my solidarity and our shared solidarity with the people of Gaza who now face a despicable onslaught from Israeli aggression. We stand with them and we will fight until we have peace and until we have justice for the Palestinian people. Now, in terms of what I want to just talk about, firstly I want to talk about what we're up against. Let's be clear, what we're up against is this. The Tories have tried to use this crisis as an opportunity to try and shift wealth and power even more in favour of big business and the wealthy, the people they exist to represent and champion. That is what we are up against. That is what austerity is, if you like. Now, that has been their historic mission for generations. And it reminds me of this quote. It was by Rahm Emanuel, who's Barack Obama's chief of staff, and he said this: "You never want to let a crisis go to waste." And what I mean by that is an opportunity to do that which you didn't think was politically possible before. That sums up the exact approach of this government and governments right across Europe as well. And I have to say, Cameron was sorely underestimated in opposition. He was dismissed as a shallow salesman, all style, no substance, who pounced about the Arctic with huskies and wanted to hold hoodies and all the rest of it. But he is leading a profoundly ideological government which is transforming Britain profoundly and if we don't stop them, for a very long time indeed. They turned a crisis of the market and they turned it into a crisis of public spending. And what they are doing is introducing policies that they know in normal times they would never have been able to get away with. The privatisation of our National Health Service, which they did not even have the guts to put to the British people because they know they would have been massacred if they had done so. Nigel Lawson, who was a Tory Chancellor in the 80s, he said the NHS was the closest that the English had to a religion. They knew its popularity and they know as a result they couldn't possibly have dreamt of telling people what they were going to do. What they do with education, the trebling of tuition fees or the scrapping of the educational maintenance allowance. The cuts, the biggest cuts since the 1920s, which Tory Minister Greg Barker last year said were cuts that Margaret Thatcher could never have even dreamt of. And of course the assault on workers' rights, hiring a multi-millionaire asset stripper and Tory donor, Adrian Beecroft, to draw up a charter to shred the remaining rights that working people have in this country. He had the audacity to call Vince Cable a socialist, which is, I think, the worst smear against the good name of socialism I've ever heard in my entire life. And of course as well, the onslaught against welfare, against the welfare state. And what we're seeing at the moment, and I just want to talk about this quickly, is the attack on disabled people right across this country. And what is absolutely disgusting and shocking, and I speak as a journalist, is the airbrushing out of existence. Those who are being pummeled by austerity, their voices are never heard. So I want to give you one example. Karen Sherlock. Karen Sherlock was found, she had an ESA stopped, she was put in the work-related activity group and expected to look for work. She said in her Twitter feed, which is still up, she talked about this inhumane government. It says in her bio, preparing for dialysis every day is tough. Her kidneys were failing and yet she was found capable of work. She died in June. And as Sue Marsh, the disability rights campaigner, put it, now she's dead. And she died in fear because the system failed her, because cruel men refused to listen and powerful men refused to act. Those stories are happening right across Britain. Last year, in the first 8 months, 1,100 people died after being found fit for work. Those are the stories we are never hearing. And indeed, not only is this a humiliating, grotesque system that disabled people are expected to go through, when people go to appeal and have an advisor, 60% of those people are found to have unfairly had their benefits taken away, but not after they've gone, as often very vulnerable people, through an awful, horrendous experience. Now, the point that's really important, I'm glad we've got an international panel, is that this isn't just happening here, this is happening right across Europe. Entire societies like Greece are being dismantled. We're seeing in places like Spain, like Greece, over half of young people who are out of work. Now, I was in Portugal last year, and I was doing a piece, and I was speaking to business people and economists, and they made it clear to me that these were policies they'd always supported. The biggest privatisation programme in the country's history, scrapping taxes on the rich, increasing them on the poor. At the moment, for example, they're deregulating on a massive scale. And I interviewed the well-connected head of the business school, who's very well-connected with senior politicians and so on. And he said there was a collision course between the reforms, as he put it, and democracy. He knew full well that these policies he always supported were not possible in normal times. He said that democracy has a strong bias in favour of the status quo. They know perfectly well that this is an ideological crusade to shift power right across Europe in favour of those at the top. But the point that we have to make, and we have to do this, and this is absolutely crucial, we have to give people confidence to fight back. We often wallow in our defeats, but I just want to talk quickly about our victories. I went up to Leeds a few months ago, and I spoke to bin collectors who had their pay cut by up to a third by a Lib Dem coalition before it was popular. They went on strike for 11 weeks. They got up at 5 AM every day in freezing temperature, and they won. They beat their employers. And I'll give you another example. Ian Bradley's here. The Sparks, when they took on Balfour Beatty, they took them on with militant action, with occupations, with determination, and they won. So we have to have that spirit of resistance. And above all, and just to finish, we have to talk about a coherent alternative. Now, I don't have time to talk about it, but we have to do that, because this is my fear. They are redirecting people's justifiable anger from the people at the top who caused this crisis to people's neighbours down the streets, the working poor against the unemployed, the non-disabled against disabled people, private sector workers against public sector workers. Our role is to give a political direction to mounting anger and frustration, to put it at the right targets. We can do that. We can build a movement together which is rooted in the communities that are being hammered by this government. We stand together, we fight together, and we will win this together. Thank you.